Good evening, everybody. Welcome to, my name is City Councillor Paul Ainslie. I'm the City Councillor for Ward 24, Scarborough Guildwood. I want to welcome everybody to my 2025 Budget Town Hall meeting this evening. It's great to see so many people out on a very cold, frigid night. I know the budget process is very important to everybody. We have a presentation from Anthony Ning from our City of Toronto Finance, who's going to be doing as I said, a presentation on the budget. Very happy to be joined by Mayor Olivia Chow, who is going to say a few words of during the opening remarks. Mayor Chow, as always, it's a great pleasure to have you here. We're doing this virtually. You come so often out to Scarborough to Ward 24, have a keen interest in everything that is happening throughout the city, but it's always great to have you back in Eastern Scarborough.
I am semi-glad you're doing it online. It's a bit cold out there. Not that I'm worried about cold, but it's nice to have people joining in. And hey, prior to us putting together this budget, now this is a staff proposed budget with the budget chief, but you know how they craft it? They craft it by listening to 12,000 people before the new year. And they went around to Scarborough. They were at Scarborough Town Center and all over the city, listening to concerns to say, with people, local residents saying, this is my top priority. And guess what, Councillor? People are saying, build more housing faster, make life more affordable, get Toronto moving better by investing in TDC, and keeping us safe. Those are the three things that I keep hearing over and over and over again. So that's exactly what this budget is doing. It is building a lot of housing and doing it faster. We have increased the speed of approving housing by 80% so that people can build more housing, because our city is growing, which is great. We have the largest number of cranes in the sky. That's a vibrant, growing city. But with it means that we have a lot of pressure. So we're building more housing, building it faster, supporting tenants. And we're also trying to make life more affordable. How? By making sure things that are free are more available. Councillor Ainslie, you were and still am the chair of library system, not just in Toronto, but across Ontario. You and I know how popular the library is to all the folks in Toronto. There's no reason why that it wouldn't be open on Sundays and on Mondays, that it would be longer hours. So in this budget, that's exactly what we are doing, because library is free. And it's sometimes a community hub. On top of that, we're building in some youth hub. So after school, young people have a place to go, a place to hang out, not just in the mall, but in the library, with really good things to do. So, and we are also feeding more kids. Why? Like, Mayor, why are you feeding kids? Well, you and I know that 1 out of 10 Torontonians use the food bank. Some of them are very quiet about it. You know why? Because they're working. They work. And they work, yet they don't make enough money because the rent is so high or the mortgage is pretty steep. So as a result, they use the food bank quietly. And we know that 1 out of 3 of them are kids. They are kids, right? So I don't know about you, Councillor. When I'm hungry, I get grumpy. I think kids, when they're hungry, they can't learn. So we are increasing more programs in school so kids have good food. Now, if the parents can pay, parents do pay. If the parents can't pay because maybe they got laid off or because they got sick or something, they don't have to pay. So it's a very important program. It's also in this budget. Now, coming to TDC, we need to in order to deal with congestion, we need to provide more bus services and more TTC, more subways. So second year in a row, no fare increase, but more services. And some folks are saying, hey, that infrastructure is so old. So we need newer station, brighter, cleaner, safer, which we are doing. And for the first time in a decade, we are putting in huge amount of money to repair the old infrastructure. If we don't do it, we're just asking for trouble. So that's what we do it. And then last thing, keeping streets safe, keeping everyone safe by investing in young people, but also investing in more officers, police officers, paramedics, firefighters, and also mental health support workers. So, and that is something that is so important to keep the streets safe as we grow. So, caring for one another, making life more affordable, keeping everyone safe, and also get Toronto moving. Hey, the other thing is that some of you might see, like, there are some traffic agent out there directing traffic. So that makes the traffic move smoother and less congestion. So that's making our life better. And that is what this budget is all about, making the change that we need in order for people to get life, to have a better life after, many years of not investing with decay and neglect. Let us really invest in people. So, Councillor, why is town hall important? Because what you're hearing, Councillor Ainslie, you're going to pass it on to the budget committee. Let me know the result. And then in 10 days' time, in January 30th, I'm going to present my budget to reflect the views of all those that are giving you their opinions tonight. So thank you for taking the time, and have a wonderful discussion.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you so much for joining us this evening. I know you've got a very busy evening as you continue to talk to people from one end of the city to the other. I always like to say, I pay my property taxes too. I want the best value for my property taxes, as do all of my residents. But we also want to live in a strong, vibrant community where we have the services we need, whether it's libraries, TTC, even as basic as making sure when you get up in the morning, you hit the light switch and the lights turn on, and you go to brush your teeth and the water turns on. So, those are all very important services to us, and I know that they get reflected in the budget that you're going to be presenting on the 30th. So thank you very much for being with us here this evening.
Thank you, Councillor. Yes, and in turning the water is clean also. I just want to thank you, Councillor Ainslie. I've known you for a longest time, and you're always fiscally very responsible. And through the years, you have trained everyone to be really important, to be fiscally responsible. I come from a family that don't have a whole lot, so every dollar matters. And because of fiscal way of through the years, but for the first time in several decades, our credit rating have gone up to AA+. I'll leave it for your budget analyst to explain why that is so important. So thank you for your leadership in the past, Councillor Ainslie, and thank you for your hard work on behalf of all your residents.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you for your leadership. Okay, at this point, I'm going to turn it over to Anthony Nang. Anthony is our Director of Financial Planning and Budgeting. He's going to give us an overview of what's being proposed in the 2025 budget for the City of Toronto. Anthony, the floor is yours. Oh, sorry, Anthony, I think you're muted.
Thanks, Councillor, for the opportunity and the invite. This is my first time coming to your ward to do the town hall budget. Good evening, everyone online. I'm excited to see you all here too. This is a great opportunity for me to present, to give some high-level information about the 2025 budget. Staff just presented the budget actually a week ago, last Monday, to the Budget Committee. So before we get started, my name is Anthony Ng, and then I work in the City Hall within the Financial Planning Division. So today I'm going to go through some slides, a PowerPoint presentation, which give you some high-level overview about the budget. And then we'll talk a little bit more about the operating budget and then the capital budget. So let me bring up my PowerPoint. Okay. So hope everyone can see this the slide. Okay, so let me share with you some key figures. This budget that we present from staff perspective, to the Budget Committee last Monday. And to begin with, this staff prepared budget addressed the city financial challenges, about $1.2 billion opening pressure through a multi-year approach, and is demonstrating a positive progress from last year. If you have a recollection, last year the City of Toronto faced about $1.8 billion budget pressure in the 2024 budget process, and this year we began with $1.2 billion. So $18.8 billion represented the operating budget, which includes the tax-supported budget and also the rate-supported budgets. So this represents a $1.8 billion increases, from 2024. In terms of the 10-year capital plan, total over the 10-year planning period, it is about $60 billion, which also represents $10 billion or 20% increases from the last year budget. So this budget, as mentioned previously, publicly, it is supported by 5.4% increase in the residential property tax, as well as the 1.5% increases in the city building fund levy, for a total of 6.9% increase in the property tax increase for 2025. Keeping in mind that this budget is not just about maintaining existing service and services level. The city is going to invest a lot of new and enhanced initiatives, totaling $94 million, which I will provide the details later. The staff budget in front of us right now, continues to be a multi-year planning approach for the city to achieve financial stability and sustainability. Staff expect that, the city's opening budget pressure to be further reduced to as low as $734 million by 2027, which is more in line with the historical experience. This budget also reflects inputs from public consultation in October last year. It also builds on the city's long-term financial plan and the 3-year Ontario-Toronto New Deal Agreement. The New Deal Agreement is a 3-year arrangement. It is important to know that the city will begin to see the reversal of the provincial funding when our current 3-year arrangement with the province comes to the end in 2026. This budget also incorporates reduction and offset by way of the line-by-line reviews, efficiency savings, in-depth program and agency reviews, and revenue adjustment while preserving critical city services. Let me share with you some perspective. Toronto, it definitely is the largest contributor to the Canadian economy. We are responsible for 20% of the national GDP. Toronto is still has the most construction cranes in North America. It has held this title for several years already. We have population more than 3 million people. The demographic is very diverse. More than 50% of people are born outside of Canada, including myself. For all the taxes we pay, local government, like the City of Toronto, receive around 9 to 10 cents for every tax dollar paid. The remaining portion of the tax dollar paid goes to the federal and the provincial government. Like other municipalities, the City of Toronto has a very limited revenue options within our control. We heavily rely on the property tax revenue. Unlike the sales tax or income tax, is relatively static. While there is a limited natural growth in our revenue base, we continue to experience both added costs to deliver municipal services, as well as a growing demand for our services, driven by the population growth and our aging demographic. On top of that, Toronto has a very unique challenge above and beyond other municipalities, arising from the operations of the largest transit system, which is TTC in this country, and increasing demand and complexities of our shelter, social services because of our demographics. As we begin work on the 2025 budget, we had to consider these challenges very unique, which bring forward the balanced budget that are unique to the municipal budgeting and also unique to the City of Toronto itself. This slide summarize. Let me give you some a recap of what we have done in 2024. Council approved 9.5% residential property tax increase in 2024. So with this money, City Council has invested in what matters to Torontonians, making life a little bit more affordable, getting Toronto moving, keeping people safe, and providing more community services. To illustrate, the added investment of more than $220 million last year enabled the city to increasing more staffing in emergency services for public safety, increase transit service hours, no TTC fare increase, provide more accessible community services, ranging from more library hours and community recreation programming. To continue this momentum initiated by the mayor and the budget chair, the city last year in October, we host a month-long engagement campaign, like a budget public consultation, including an online survey and various consultation sessions for residents to participate. In total, the city received over 12,000 responses into our budget survey. We got the chance to meet over 760 participants at 6 different sections across the city, including in person and virtual. We also had the chance to meet additional 330 participants joined in the local meeting hosted by the community organizations with the Indigenous, Black, and equity-deserving communities. Now, let me get into a little bit more about the operating budget. So to address the $1.2 billion opening pressure, we through the following. We continue actions from our long-term financial plan, bridging strategies consistent with our multi-year approach. Staff identified $680 million in reduction and offset through the staff review process. And ultimately, the budget is supported by the 5.4% residential property tax increases to fund the operating budget. And as part of the $18.8 billion budget, we also are able to manage additional new and enhanced investment of the $94 million to reflect the input from the Toronto residents. The $18.8 billion budget, in this donor chart has two elements. So one, the majority, the lion's share is the tax-supported programs, which is about $16.6 billion or 88%. And we also have a small portion, which is the rate-supported budget, which is about $2.2 billion. Rate-supported budget means programs like Toronto Water, the solid waste management services, and Toronto Parking Authority, which rely on the utility charges rather than funded by the property tax basis. Looking at the spending, this slide would show what our total gross expenditure spending based on with the full length of the bar describing the total spending for 2025, and the yellow bars representing the amount of property tax fund required to delivering these services. As illustrated in this slide, we continue to spend a significant amount on the city's cost-sharing social programs, with a total spend of $5.1 billion in 2025. These include programs which receive contributions from other levels of government, such as Toronto Employment and Social Services, Children's Services, Shelter Support, Housing, and also long-term care homes and Toronto Public Health. Now, I won't speak to all the categories, but I will quickly note that more than $2.8 billion spending for transit services, which is the second category, the second highest spending for the city. Next, which is our rate program, which is Toronto Water, Solid Waste, and also Toronto Parking Authority, which represent 12% of our total investment. It follows by our Toronto Police budget, which is about $1.4 billion in total spend. About $1.27 billion in capital financing support, which is debt servicing charges, costs, and also the obligation. I will also point out that corporate accounts, which is about $1.25 billion, includes expense such as the entire organization for insurance, employee-related liabilities. We also capture corporate revenues like interest income, dividends, municipal land transfer tax, which is why the budget in the chart, it shows a negative as an overall net revenue in this graphic. You probably have seen this chart before if you attend one of the public consultation. This is the update version of the slide. And then you can see the red color, the red towel on the left of the graphic. It represents the $1.2 billion opening budget pressure facing the city of Toronto. So every 1% of the property tax increase will generate $46.4 million in annual revenue. So you can picture, to provide perspective, if we want to address the $1.2 billion budget pressure through the property tax change alone, it would have required a 26% residential property tax increases. Alternatively, if we have approached the 2025 budget challenge through a budget reduction or service reduction, we would need to eliminate expenditure. That means equivalent to the full cost of our transit service in the city. That means that would include subway, streetcar, buses, and even wheel transit services to bring forward a balanced budget. And apparently, we didn't take either of these actions. I will take you through in the next slide, how staff, bring forward a balanced budget for 2025. There are 5 key balancing actions on this slide. First, as we always do, as part of the budget process, staff review budget submissions and identify potential opportunities for offsets and efficiencies and other revenue actions during our internal review process. Collectively, we identify $680 million in reductions and offsets. Second, we identify $41 million through actions implemented through the long-term financial plan. So what is that? This includes added revenue from the graduated municipal land transfer tax rate on the high value homes greater than $3 million, and also the new revenue implement for this budget, which is called non-resident speculation tax. Next, our balancing action accounts for $330 million multi-year bridging strategy. We realize that the $1.2 billion budget pressure, it is a multi-year approach to address that. As a result, we still rely on a one-time bridging measure through the withdrawal of the $330 million from the reserve, which were intended to be the temporary measures, and we need to strategically manage this pressure we face over the next few years. Fourth, the opening budget, the 2025 budget incorporates $251 million increase, which is based on the property tax increase of $5.4 million. And last but not least, we count on the federal funding to offset our refugee costs. So in this budget, we include additional $50 million from the federal government for that support. I mentioned earlier, $94 million new and enhanced investment has been included in this budget. And this is based on the input from the public consultations that the city did in last year. Investment include making life more affordable with the focus on affordable housing, costs associated with transit, childcare, and food, getting Toronto moving, expanding and improving the service hours and reliability, accessibility of the TTC, and increased investment for traffic congestion management, providing more community services, new need for enhanced programming, parks, library, community centers, as well as climate action program, keeping people safe, prioritize violence prevention, especially youth violence, and also proactive measures, as well as increased funding for emergency services for a total of $94 million. The 5.4% residential property tax that the staff is bring forward, what does that mean? So if your assets value for homeowners, that represents equals to an increase about $210 for the average home per year, or around $17.50 per month. Okay. The most important thing is that the city continues to have the property tax relief program, and also the tax increase deferral program, and also the tax increases cancellation program. These programs benefit over 10,000 households on an annual basis, as long as you meet the income threshold criteria. And since 2015, since it introduced, it has provided over $44 million in tax relief to Torontoians. If you live in a multi-residential properties, what does that mean? So this budget will increase by half only, not 5. It's only 2.7%, half of the residential property tax increase of 5.4. If you are the commercial owner, properties owner, so your property tax increase will be 2.7%, and also industrial property, it will be 5.4%. And this budget will also continue to give some break to the small business owner for eligible properties with the 15% reduction. So it's so currently it benefits over 28,000 small business. This slide is about the utility rate, which is your water consumption and also your solid waste. So this budget proposed 3.75%. What does that mean? It will result in an average annual household increase about $39 per year based on the 230 cubic meters of water consumed. And in terms of the solid waste, the garbage bin, it will result in an average increase of $11 to $21 for a single family home, depending on the size of their garbage bin. So now I'm finished the operating budget. So now I'm moving on to the capital budget and plan for the city. And then we have a 10-year capital plan, which is about $60 billion. More than half, like 54% of our budget, almost $60 billion, goes to the state of good repair, which is about $32.4 billion. So, and this budget also continues to enhance our climate focus. So we have about almost $14 billion investment over the 10-year period in the city's building, transportation, TTC, fleet services, waste management, and then with the aim to reduce over 160,000 tons of carbon dioxide emission, which is 69%, improvement from the 2024 plan. This capital plan, 10-year capital plan, continues to be supported by the added 1.5% city building fund levy increases, so which is leveraged to support the critical investment in transit housing. So with that 1.5 increase city building fund, the city is able to make a significant increase in capital investment while maintaining a balanced capital plan and staying within our 15% debt servicing ratio. And now we see the similar donor chart for the capital too. So there are two elements. This includes $40.2 billion, which is about 67% for our tax-supported programs, and the $19.4 billion, which is 33% for our waste-supported programs through Toronto Water, Solid Waste, and Toronto Parking Authority, the 10-year capital plan. Okay, so this chart illustrates where the money goes. You can see that the $17.6 billion, which is the highest spending, which is about 28% of our 10-year capital plan, that is directed to water and wastewater infrastructure and stormwater investment. The city highest investment for tax-based funding is the transit, of course, which is about $17 billion, very close. This represents 26% of the total 10-year capital plan, with the considerable added investment made this year, over by $5.1 billion when compared to the last year. The city is also committed to spending $4.5 billion in housing, coupled with a further $4.5 billion in foregone revenues provided to the development to incentivize the development of the affordable homes and the rent control homes across the city. The city will also spend about $5.2 billion on environment and recreational activities projects. This includes investment within parks, waterfront revitalization, environment and energy, as well as the Toronto Regional Conservation Authority. City Building Fund is the added levy, 1.5%, specific to fund the capital program, not operating. So with this 1.5% increase, what does that mean? It will result in an annual increase of another $58 for average home, or equivalent to $4.86 per month. And the City Building Fund is specifically dedicated to supporting transit and housing investment in the 10-year capital plan. And in 2025, the City Building Fund is expected to generate more than $380 million in total revenue. So this has become a very important stream of funding source to support the city's 10-year capital plan. So what does it buy of this 10-year capital plan? Within the perspective of getting Toronto moving. So that means we will be able to see a lot more investment towards transit and also transportation. We were able to acquire, for example, 55 replacement subway cars for Line 2. $1.2 billion will be invested to purchase about 700 e-buses and 950 charging stations. $1 billion being added for investment to both repair critical subway infrastructure like the signal, the electrical, and the communication system. And we are also adding $500 million to overhaul programs for buses, streetcars, and subways. And at the same time, we are making additional investment in transportation services for $380 million for the city bridge and road rehabilitation. In terms of providing more community services, we are going to add $400 million to advance the state of good repair in all our recreational facilities. $349 million in combination of the direct investment and also incentives to the development, enabling housing supply and more affordable homes. We continue to invest in repairing TCHC buildings by adding $300 million investment in the 10-year capital plan. And last but not least, we have also added a further over $220 million to continue to advance our homelessness service capital infrastructure strategy. State of good repair. With all this investment, even I have just described, the city's state of good repair is still growing. With this year added investment, not only do we see an initial decrease in our backlog, but we're also starting to see the flattening of the growth curve. So the 2020, the red line represents from last year, and the blue line represents for this year budget in 2025. So this is already an improvement. We are slow, even though the growth is still continue, it was still increasing, but the pace is lower than we originally forecast. To recap, the City of Toronto was on a challenged financial path, which couldn't keep pace with the growing number of capital and operational pressures. We continue to be the economic engine for Ontario and also Canada. The path we are on, the challenge that we are faced were very unique to Toronto. We have stepped up to do what we could, but it is also very clear that we cannot do it by ourselves, and then we cannot change the direction alone or overnight. So that's why the staff have come up the multi-year journey and approach to address the budget shortfall. And it is also more important, we continue to work closely with the other levels of government, including the province and the federal, as part of the journey to enhance the City of Toronto, the future financial stability. The budget, as the mayor pointed out, it is not done. It is just a start prepared budget. And so that's why we have this town hall meeting. And then we continue, over the next 2 days, we are going to have a lot of public deputations which will be also serve another opportunity for the public to participate to the Budget Committee member. On January 24, then the Budget Committee will, after hearing staff budget, after hearing all the programs and agencies, and also the public deputations, the Budget Committee members will provide a recommendation for the mayor. And then the mayor will propose her budget by February 1st. And then the budget and the city council collectively will have a special meeting on February 11th to review and discuss the budget and following the mayor release of her proposed budget. Thank you so much for the opportunity. This concludes my presentation, and thank you so much, Councillor, for the opportunity for me to present the materials.
Thank you so much, Anthony. Thank you for a very thorough presentation of what is at times a very complicated budget. And I just wanted to, before we go to the question and answer session this evening, Anthony, I just wanted to do a quick rundown of some of the Ward 24 focused investments and what they mean to my residents and myself, and what we're getting out of this budget locally. And so just to quickly run down the list that I have of both in operating and capital benefits to the people of Ward 24. We're going to be getting 2 new parks, the Grant Faulkner Park at 320 Markham Road, which is just north of Eglinton. It's going to be completed in 2026 at 705 Progress. We have a park development discussion there. We jointly own property with the public school board, and we're looking at, there's going to be a new school there, and within that area, there's going to be new parkland. We're looking at 2 new splash pads for the ward, Scarborough Village Park, which is at Markham and Kingston Road. The plans are opening that in the summer of 2025. I've been working with Mayor Chow. We've had a lot of demand for a splash pad in Cornell Park. And I've been working with the mayor and getting money in the financing. So we are going to be having a splash pad. Work on that's going to be commencing in 2026, with construction being done in 2027. So I want to thank Mayor Chow for working with me and understanding the needs of our community for 2 splash pads, a new one in particular. There's going to be playground enhancements. Lusted Park will be done in 2026. Densgrove Park Playground is going to also be done in 2026. New skateboard park for Confederation Park is going to be completed in 2026. New skate spots at local parks. There's going to be Elizabeth Simcoe Park is going to be completed in 2026, and Woburn Park in 2025, along with a basketball court resurfacing. We are going to be building new public washroom building by 2028, which is going to be the front of the Guild Park and Gardens. We've had been working with the Friends of Guild Park, the Guildwood Village Community Association, Guildin Estates on the need for more permanent washrooms at Guild Park and Gardens. Cedar Ridge Studio and Creative Center. We're going to continue on the restoration and improvements to the main building. And this is an ongoing project that's going to take us into the early 2030s. Centennial Recreation Center by 2033 within the 10-year budget is going to have a new gymnasium. Scarborough Golf Club Road is having some construction work done. We're having water main replacements done throughout the ward. Road resurfacing is going to happen on Brimorton Road, Greenbrae Circuit, Green Home Circuit, Parndon Place. Galloway Road is going to see new sidewalk and cycling infrastructure, traffic control signals on Morningside Avenue at Warrensworth, Gilwood Parkway at Roe-Watson, new pedestrian sidewalks. A number of streets are having speed hump installations done in 2025, including Hill Crescent, Van Allen Road, Stephenvale, Pegasus Trail, and Waldock Street. So that's just a quick summary of what's the ward's going to see in the upcoming budget, both the operating and the capital budget. So at this point, I'm going to open it up. Anthony will open it up to question and answers from the public. I just wanted to remind everybody, if you'd like to ask a question, if you could please raise your hand by clicking the hand symbol at the bottom in the control bar, or you can hover over your name in the attendees list on the right side of the app and click the hand symbol when beside your name when it appears. If you're phoning in, you can please dial *3. When your name is called, you'll be unmuted. You'll be muted again after your question to avoid any noise interference. Please click the hand symbol or dial *3 again to be removed from the queue. I'd encourage everybody, if you could, answer questions verbally and not write them in the Q&A. It's past practice. It's been a little more expedient to be asking questions verbally and not writing them down. And the other thing that I always do with all of my community events, Anthony, and for my residents, is I try to ask people if they can ask one question at a time, to be fair to everybody. One question at a time. We'll try to get to everybody. If you can raise your hand again if you have a second question, so we can be fair to everybody. So at this point, I'm just going to ask people if they can raise their hand in the attendees list if you do have a question. Alex, I'm not seeing the hand. If you can see them, can you call the names?
Yeah, sure. So the first person was Fatiha Hossein. I'm gonna unmute you right now. Fatiha, go ahead.
Be quick here. My name is Fatia, and I'm a constituent of Councillor Ainslie's ward, as well as actively responding to Toronto's extreme food insecurity crisis by working at Toronto's largest food justice nonprofits. And I'd like to thank Councillor Ainslie for hosting this amazing session and getting to hear a little bit more about the budget. Great to hear about the parks and the splash pads and the other improvements that are going to be happening in our community. Post-COVID, I've seen what the impact has been on food security and the rising needs of Torontonians to the poly-crisis situation that we find ourselves in terms of cost of living, food security, and housing, among other needs. And I'm concerned that this budget does not ensure adequate investment for addressing the poly-crisis that Torontonians find themselves in. And I really do appreciate the emphasis on getting Toronto moving and improving our infrastructure in this budget. But I would like to have it explained to me as to why this budget would also be relegating 40% of its budget to the Toronto Police, especially when shelter services, social services, and crucial initiatives such as revitalizing Toronto's right to food also require extensive funding. Because according to the gross and net budget, Toronto Police will be getting over $1.4 billion, which will be outpacing shelter services, libraries, and other social needs. And Toronto needs more renter supports and needs more housing benefits and other key social programs instead of an overinflated police budget, right? Because it needs to fully support the needs of all Torontonians, including folks that are houseless, disabled, who are renters, and low-income earners, as I myself am a renter. And investing in social services is not only financially responsible and fiscally responsible, but also helps to offload extenuating costs in the future. For example, if we're investing more diligently in youth programming, it will result in less violent crime, which will mean less need for Toronto Police. So I think I would just like to understand or have that explained to me as to why the Toronto Police are being given $1.4 billion and what opportunities there are to potentially have that conversation about reducing the Toronto Police budget to fund social services, because I'm sure myself and many other constituents here today would like to see more of those funds allocated to services that we would all benefit from instead of an overinflated police budget. Thank you.
No problem, Feda. Thank you very much for your question. And sorry if I could just ask one quickly back to you. What services in Ward 24 do you, in terms of food security, would you like to see enhanced budget-wise? Because I've been doing a lot of work with the Southeast Asian Autism Awareness Center, East Scarborough Storefront, Boys and Girls Club of East Scarborough. I've been working very diligently to ensure breakfast programs, for example, have been increased right across the ward. I have 6 neighborhood improvement areas in the ward that I'm working very diligently at in ensuring they have the finances in that budget for the social services they need. I've always said one of my goals when I leave office is I don't want any priority or neighborhood improvement areas in my ward. So any suggestions you can give, I would love to hear. If you'd like to email them to my office.
Sure. I could definitely follow up with your office, but I can quickly kind of connect here. And again, I think that all sounds really amazing, that you're doing such amazing work to connect with so many agencies across our ward. In terms of funding, I work at Food Share Toronto, and so as somebody who works so directly with, right across our city, but including our ward, we need money allocated in regards to the right to food, right? So for example, Food Share, working alongside the social development team at the City of Toronto, has been hosting over 100 agencies across the city to talk about the need around the right to food and what that revitalization of that initiative would look like, right? And ensuring that the right to food charter adequately reflects the needs of all Torontonians. And so, for example, we need funding, for example, for more garden space. We need funding for more community kitchen space. For example, my program that I help to support run, we support agencies and grassroots groups to start community markets in all sorts of different neighborhoods. And like, for example, my program needs more funding. Like, our funding has been, and this is just true of the nonprofit sector, but we're especially being hit in Toronto in regards to food insecurity, because our funding, while the rates of food insecurity has increased 4 to 9% year after year, our budgets have gone down in terms of programming. For example, from 2021 to 2024, my program was offering a food subsidy program to reduce the cost of produce, and now we didn't have funding for it because we weren't able to get the increased funding, but also because the cost of produce is outpacing people's capacity to be spending money on fresh fruits and vegetables. And so I think that's a clear example. And I really appreciate that you've, really specifically talked about specific, examples working with East Scarborough Storefront and, breakfast programs, and all of that is amazing. But I would like to have us get to a point where we can reimagine a social services, part of the budget where shelter services and community services are getting more fulsome funding and multi-year funding, instead of a police budget that's getting $1.4 billion, and that for me, as somebody who works so directly and so closely with this poly crisis and is responding to so many of these concerns, both at an agency level and at a community level, to having folks call me, to ask about, food resources. I just, as one of your residents, or sorry, as one of your constituents, being at that intersection means that I can see where, having a police budget that is taking up $1.4 billion, that is outpacing the costs of housing and.
Sorry, Fada, there's
services.
other people waiting to ask questions.
For sure, and I'll wrap
Yep.
up. That doesn't make sense to me, and I'm just wondering if we can open up that conversation to reducing the police budget.
Yeah, appreciate your feedback. Sorry,
Thank you.
Anthony, you had your hand up.
Oh, just want to provide some additional information for the constituent, the comment. This year budget, there's as part of the $94 million, there is a $6 million being added through the Toronto Public Health to deliver the student nutrition program. So including this additional $6 million, so for total, about 12,000 students that on a daily basis will be able to benefit, this added investment through the student nutrition program. And secondly, is about in terms of the food security. As part of the last week, January 17 Budget Committee, there is a request, for the city, to provide a summary in the briefing note about the budget in terms of the food security. So I just want to let the constituent know that stay tuned on the budget website. This briefing note information will highlight the current city existing investment to address the food security. Based on the number I see right now, currently, it is about $3 million or so, which is part of the current budget, existing budget. Can we do more? Yes, but that is what we got. That is what we could afford, and that's what we have in the budget. So stay tuned and watch out that briefing note, which talks about the food security and the city's budget to address that.
Okay, thank you, Anthony. Next, I have Kristen Wallace. Kristen, if you can go ahead. Kristen? Kristen Wallace. Okay, maybe we will come back to her. Next, I have Anthony. Anthony, you have the floor.
I was getting confused when we were saying Anthony Ng all the time on which Anthony. So I'm glad I.
Sorry, Anthony. On the list of attendees, it just says Anthony.
Oh, that's all good. Yeah. So I had a comment quickly on the operating budget, and then a question as well. My comment that I think would make these presentations better is focusing a bit on what the net outcome to the end user is for some of the investments you're making. And I'll give you a couple examples.
Sorry, Anthony, we're doing questions right now. So if you could quickly comment and then get to your question. Okay,
well, I am going to quickly comment. So we talked about traffic agents and 20K hours of congestion management as an example, and 5.8% increase in service hours for TTC. But what does that mean to someone from a commute perspective? Like I can't translate that into how does that help the average person get around the city faster? So it's tough to tell if those investments actually make sense. So this was a comment to Andrew Ng, really, is I think presentations would be better if you could talk about what the end customer gets out of it. Because right now I can't tell from 5.8% increase in TTC service hours as an example. And I could go through a bunch of the list, but I'll get to the question. I'll try to be quicker than the last person in answering or asking my question here. The question I have is, why are we freezing the TTC budget and then putting that expense on the homeowner only? Because it's not only homeowners who use the TTC, everyone uses it, and it feels like all of the burden of the increased expenses in Toronto now are falling on the homeowner, and not enough is being shared amongst non-homeowners. That's general feedback. And also my question is, why are we doing that with TTC? Why not raise prices and have a fair share contributed by all users? So that's my question.
Well, I guess to start off first, Anthony, like I sit on the TTC commissioner, I'm on the board of directors or a commissioner. So we're not freezing the TTC budget. We've increased it substantially. We're freezing fares this year. And part of that is to help stimulate the ridership growth of the TTC to try and get it back to pre-COVID levels, helping people get back on their feet, not having to see an increase of transit fares. In terms of the financing of the TTC, a lot of the operating dollars for the TTC comes out of the fare box, and that's the way it's been structured, probably going back to when Mike Harris was premier, when they almost fully funded and operated the TTC and Toronto Community Housing. I often joke about other municipalities. I always use the example of Seattle, where they get, so every dollar that operates their transit system, 80 cents of every dollar comes from their state government and 20 cents comes from the fare box. Here in Toronto and across Ontario, it's almost the reverse. It's close to 80 cents of every dollar to operate the TTC comes out of the fare box. We get 20 cents from the provincial government, and we hardly get any money from the federal government. We most recently got a check, I believe it was $200 million from the federal government. And I've been a city councillor for 18 years, and that's the first time in my memory we've gotten any structural funding from the federal government for the TTC. And then in terms of financing, so there's a portion of your property taxes. So homeowners they are paying a portion of the property tax is going to the TTC, but renters, correct me, Anthony Ning, if I'm getting this wrong, but if I'm renting, I'm paying my rent to the landlord, and the landlord's paying property taxes, which are going to the TTC. So if I'm a renter, you know, part of my rent eventually trickles through my landlord, and it goes to the city in property taxes, which are paying for the operation and capital structure of the TTC. So it's not just homeowners that are helping to operate the TTC. It's everyone, whether you're a homeowner or a renter. Our next question is, sorry, we'll try Kristen Wallace again. Kristen? Kristen Wallace? Kristen? All right. Sorry, we're going to try Ahmed.
Can you hear me there?
I can, go ahead.
First of all, I'd like to thank you and Mayor Olivia Chow for the splash pad at Cornell Park. It's much needed. My question is regarding the speed humps. You mentioned Van Allen and Stephenville are getting them. I believe there was some emails sent about Confederation and Barron Drive and some other local roads in the community. Any status update on those?
Yeah, so a Confederation at this point, I know there was supposed to be a petition coming in from residents, which people have talked about, but I haven't actually seen the petition yet. And we are asking transportation staff to look at Confederation. At this point, I don't think there's any money set aside in the budget for it, though. Next is Salia Patel.
Sorry, I muted by accident.
That's okay. Go ahead.
I also wanted to thank you very much for the splash pad at Cornell Park. I noticed that park is busy all throughout spring and summer, and the people there could really use it, myself included. Like I come from a family with a lot of children, and children love splash pads, so it would be really nice to have one locally. My question was about the TTC and if the city could look into getting platform barriers just to make the tracks safer for everybody.
Sorry, platform barriers at the subway stations?
Yes, at the subway stations, like to protect people from falling onto the tracks.
Yeah, and it's Celia, it's something that we have been talking about, in particular, the downtown stations, which are getting busier and busier throughout the downtown core. We're expecting, you know, the provincial government wants to extend the subway system into York region, which is going to make it even busier. And I can tell you as a TTC commissioner, it's something that we're looking at. They're they're incredibly expensive to put in. And I believe it's in our long-term budget. We don't have anything immediate as we're trying to maintain and upgrade the system in terms of new subway cars, signaling system, which I believe our signaling system in the subway is about 80 years old, and we're looking at trying to get funding through the property taxes and the provincial government for a new signaling system so we can run trains faster and also run more trains within the system. But yeah, long-term outlook, we're looking at barriers, but there's nothing in the immediate budget. Yusuf. Yusuf?
Hey, Paul, can you hear me?
Hey, we can hear you.
Hey, how you doing, Paul?
Good. Yourself?
Good,
Happy
thank
New
you.
Year.
Happy New Year to you too. Nice to see you, looking sharp. I just wanted to thank you sincerely. Sorry again, it's Yusuf for Friends of Cornell and Mayor Olivia Chow. You guys work very hard, always dedicated to our community since day one. So I just want to thank you for that. A lot of kids are excited, very much needed. A lot of newcomers, a lot of original neighborhood born and raised kids. So it'll be benefit to more than what you think, and a long-term investment, definitely for sure. Um, Definitely, and thank you. As previously, we got the cherry trees planted at Cornell Park, and the lights put in. It's been a big impact for winter, and a massive reduction in crime. You've know that, as we've seen, majority of the shootings from the previous issues we've had have gone to almost zero, aside from recent tow truck issues, which are not more related to the neighborhood. But yeah, thank you for everything you've done for us. The only question or comment I had, and I think it was already touched on, is that the speed humps on the rest of the roads were studied. We have talked to Anton and Jennifer, but if you can kind of circle back on that and see what the status was. There was no more petition as per the requirement, and see if there's budget for it. That was the only comment. Other than that, I just want to thank you guys sincerely. You guys done amazing for us and a lot of work for us since day one. We really appreciate you guys.
Yeah, thank you, Yusuf. And, I want to thank you for all of your advocacy, from day one, a couple of years ago, for the splash pad in Cornell Park and bringing it to our attention. I think Cornell Park, it's not the biggest park in my ward, but it's probably next to Morningside Park is the most highest used park, and there's lots of amenities in there that I'd like to see very well used by the community. I think splash pad's going to be a tremendous asset. I know lots of people have been asking for it, and once again, I can't thank you enough for your advocacy work. It's helped get me to get it on the mayor's radar screen. I always have my monthly town hall meetings that I invite everybody to come out to, because it helps me listen to concerns and the desires of people, what amenities they want in their park. And if I can hear those voices, it helps me go back to City Hall, in particular at budget time, to advocate for the budget committee. And if I have people submitting petitions and letters and emails, and I can bring those to my colleagues and the mayor on the budget committee, it helps draw attention to what's needed in my ward. And following that process and successfully getting a splash pad about to be constructed in Cornell Park is clear evidence of the success of the community advocating and working with me to have an amenity put in. And I just wanted to touch base as well, Anthony Ning, because I believe Anthony that was questioning before was also asking about the cost of a splash pad. And splash pads, they vary in size, they vary in cost. A very small splash pad now, I believe, is about $200,000, and they can range up into the high $700,000-800,000. And people will look at a splash pad and they look at the amenities of a splash pad and the water features and the size of it, and they'll say to me, "How can this cost $400,000, $500,000, $600,000, Anthony?" And part of the rationale or the cost, it's not always about what's above ground, it's what's below ground. And the infrastructure and the piping that has to be built, connection to a water main, to get the water into a splash pad. And sometimes depending on where the water infrastructure is in terms of where the splash pad's going to go in a park, that below ground infrastructure can sometimes double the cost of a splash pad. So there's a lot of variables going into the cost of a splash pad. And, we try to work with the community. Part of the monies that's going into the Cornell one is what's called Section 37, is money from a development project where a developer basically pays for the air rights. When they buy, for example, a strip plaza, they buy a strip plaza and they pay for the increased density or air rights over that property in terms They used to pay in what was called Section 37, and that money had to go to the community for community benefits, for splash pad, playground enhancement, public libraries, public art, but it had to stay in my ward within a certain area around that development. And I was able to move some money from a project on Markham Road at Ellesmere down to Markham Road in Lawrence to help pay for this splash pad. The mayor, within the budget process, found the balance of that money. So she heard our community loud and clear that what we needed at Cornell Park. And once again, want to thank the mayor for her support of my community. And I'm just going to go back to the list. I have, sorry, Ted. Ted, can you hear us? You have the floor.
Yep, I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Yep, loud and clear.
Thank you for hosting this. I'm a new Torontonian resident, and me and my fiance just moved in last year when the property tax hike went to a record of 9.5%, and this one here at 6.9%. Me and my fiance just have a question in terms of the money that the city's collecting. Is there any conversation happening at city council when the cost of living is so high, and the city also collects a land transfer tax on all residents that is purchased in the city of Toronto? Is there any opportunity to, instead of tax the citizens, maybe reduce the taxes and see what services maybe aren't being used to the fullest and where we can cut? Just because I do feel at this point in time, it is a little expensive for Torontonians, especially for like a young couple like ourselves. So I'm just curious to know your perspective on that, if there's any opportunity for discussions about, instead of how we can tax our citizens more, maybe how we can use the money we have already a little more effectively. Thanks.
Yep, no problem, Ted. So just a bit, and Anthony can correct me at any time. So, and Ted, I'm going to use an example of one of my friends the other day. I was having a discussion. He lives in Pickering. I had another friend in Durham within my group of friends. His mother actually lives in my ward, and he was commenting on the fact that, property taxes at 6.9%, and they're paying 8.9 in Durham, which is more than Toronto. But for somebody that's retired in Scarborough, paying 6.9% is a lot of money. And the first thing I did was I broke down that 6.9% as the property tax increases at 5.4, and then we have an infrastructure tax or levy, I'll call it, that's 1.5%. So that's how you get 6.9. And I further within my explanation, Ted, to my friend, was explaining that when we levy property taxes, we can't make money off property taxes. We can't run a profit. If we levy property taxes and we end up having a surplus because we overestimated on land transfer tax or on the cost of our services, we try to put that money in reserve funds. And so a reserve fund is kind of like your bank account, where you put money in the reserve fund for a rainy day or a crisis, and then you take that money out to help balance the budget. But what we do with property taxes is they basically cover our costs for the services that we need to deliver. Once again, we can't make a profit on them. There's also the concept of zero-based budgeting, where you basically take your budget right down to ground zero and you build it up from there to figure out what your property taxes should be. And one of my colleagues a few years ago said, why don't you do zero-based budgeting? And I said, well, first off, one of the problems we have is we have cost share programs that we deliver for the provincial government and the federal government. And those cost share programs, more often than not, get capped. And what I mean by that, I'll use the example of ambulatory care. In the most basic sense, if an ambulance came to your door and it costs $1 for that ambulance to come to the door, we share that service with the provincial government. And I think, I'm going to say 65%, 65 cents of every dollar is from the provincial government and 35 cents from property taxes. I'm not sure if that's right, Anthony, but that's the example I'm going to use. The difficulty, Ted, is that if it costs $1 to deliver that cost shared service this year, and in 2026 it goes up to $1.10, the provincial government caps their delivery at 65 cents. So even though it's gone up 10 cents more, we don't get another 10 cents from them next year. We pay that additional 10 cents out of our property taxes. So so we get mandated to deliver programs like that, and the costs go up, and we have to bear that on the property taxes. And we've also gone, when you talk, your other part of your question was about looking at services that we either don't deliver or can't deliver. I always have a very interesting conversation because people will say to me, I don't use this service, so why should I pay for it? Often it's, once again, ambulatory care. I never call the fire department, so why do I need to pay for fire services? Maybe the buses need to run less. But what I find is that when one person might not be using that service, there's a lot of people that do rely on that service, which is why we're delivering it. And while the cost of an individual service might seem expensive, spread out across the entire property tax base, it actually makes the cost of that service much more reliable. And over the years, part of what we do each and every year, and what Anthony Ning is a key part of, is our budget committee goes through every department almost line by line, looking at individual budgets to decide if there's cost savings, are we being realistic in that budget? So I have a lot of confidence that when we say property taxes are 5.4%, that's as low as we can make it going through that budget process. And then the infrastructure levy on top of that. And once again, for myself as a city councillor, I pay property taxes, and I like to see the best value for the taxes that I pay, and I know my residents do as well. So we are very cognizant of what we're charging for and the services that you deliver. And I think you're getting the best bang for your buck with this budget. Sorry, that was a long answer. I don't know if Anthony, if there's anything you wanted to add.
I also want to make a note that property tax increase is definitely the last resort that we use. After exhausting all the expenditure reduction or maximized all the revenue opportunities, including in this budget, staff has identified about $680 million, both expenditure and also revenue opportunities, to bring down the budget pressure of $1.2 billion. However, we still not be able to get to the budget pressure zero without increasing the property tax. And also we continue to withdraw the reserve, about $330 million to balance this budget. So this is the staff look at line by line review, just like Councillor said. We look at all the expenditure based on the historical spending pattern. We cut all the discretionary expenditure. Some of the divisions with a lot of contract, like for example, fleet services and also technology services, they have a lot of contract, and also facilities management. We asked them having a couple of years to review contract by contract, renew the contract, looking for savings opportunity, change the contractors, use different vendor to bring down the cost. So city staff have done a lot of work, on that front, to bring down the budget pressures.
Okay, thank you, Anthony. And sorry, just to go back to one of the previous questioners, the Confederation Drive speed humps. I just checked my notes, and there is a study expected to come back from the Transportation Department on the validity of the speed humps in April. And I believe next is it Ingar? Ingar, you have the Ingar, you have the floor.
Sorry, my mic wasn't working there for a second. Just want to say thanks for taking time out to chat with us, Paul. Also want to say thank you for supporting the Splash Pad initiative, you as well as Mayor Chow. My question is in regards to um, all the added bike lanes that are coming in the area. I know there's one planned for Scarborough Golf Club as well. Just want to know what kind of studies are being done to support these initiatives. Um, I know I support bike lanes in major corridors like north, south, east, west corridors, but smaller roads like Golf Club Road, there'll be parking taken away. Those residences will be affected. So I just kind of want to know what kind of studies were done to implement these bike lanes.
Yep. So we had a pretty comprehensive consultation process on the infrastructure needs on Scarborough Golf Club, and there were surveys done about bicycle usage. And I'm also when it comes to bike lanes, one of the things that I'm always a very strong proponent of is I need bike lanes to be connected. I want to see a system of bike lanes where everything is interconnected. I don't want a bike lane that starts at point A and point B and doesn't go anywhere. It doesn't connect to any infrastructure. So for the Scarborough Golf Club, for example, we've had a lot of demand and requests for bike lanes on Scarborough Golf Club. They're also going to connect into the Meadowway, which runs through the Gatineau Hydro Corridor. They're going to connect, so you'll be able to ride up and down Scarborough Golf Club, connect into the Gatineau Hydro Corridor. You'll be able to go, ride your bike downtown from Scarborough Golf Club Road. You can also connect into the Morningside Park Trail system. We recently had new bridges put in across Highland Creek. 3 new bridges went in during COVID into Morningside Park. So you can actually ride your bikes right down to Lake Ontario. You can connect up with the Great Canadian Waterfront Trail, they call it. You can ride your bike on a marked trail system if you wanted to, from Halifax. So, I am a very strong proponent of, our bike system, but it has to be integrated, as they said. And so next we have, John Paul Edwards.
Yes, my question is, well, I got one question, maybe for Anthony, and one question for you, Paul. I'm wondering, has the status of the Science Center been set that it's definitely going to remain closed? And for you, Paul, I guess, when is the TTC extension from Kennedy to Melbourne Town Center going to start? My understanding it's going to go along Eglinton to Kingston Road, and from Kingston Road up Morningside. I'm wondering when that's going to start.
Yeah, so I guess the first one, John Paul, in the Ontario Science Center. So the province has closed it. They're talking about moving it to Ontario. Sorry, the Science Center is closed. They're talking about moving it to Ontario Place. We don't have a lot of information on what they want to do at the Science Center or what their plans are. I can tell you that I'm the chair of the board of directors of the Toronto Region and Conservation Authority. The Conservation Authority actually owns the land that the Science Center is on. So there would have to be, and we haven't had any outreach or notification at all from the province about what their intention is to do on the property. So we're still kind of waiting. That's on a wait and hold pattern. For the Eglinton East LRT that's supposed to run from the Kennedy subway station across Eglinton, down to Kingston Road and up Morningside and into Malvern. So we're just at the tail end of completing what's called the environmental assessment for it. We have, I believe, about $2 billion sitting in the bank to help build it. We're currently advocating with both the provincial and federal governments for money for the balance of it. I believe the current cost of a fully constructed Eglinton East LRT is about $4.5 billion. So we're roughly looking for about $2 billion from the other two levels of government. I badger the Premier all the time about it. I just had a meeting last month with Deputy Mayor McKelvey, with the Scarborough MPs, making sure they understood the need. And, you know, if we can get the money from the other two levels of government, you know, we would have a we would have a shovel in the ground as soon as possible. Sorry, I'm just calling up my list. I have Ahmed. Sorry, Alex, are these Ahmed? Yusuf?
Hey, Paul. I already spoke. My hand was already, I guess they didn't put it
Oh,
down,
okay.
but I just want to comment on one part though. I know they are doing Scarborough Golf Club. They're going to reduce it to 1 lane each way, including buses and ambulance. But that's just a comment. I guess I know it's already been voted on and moving forward, but it is something that I guess the community had some concern where it would be an impact for you know, snow plows and ambulances and buses and, you know, singular lanes at the same time might be a bottleneck. It is something that we want to give feedback on. I know it's too late probably because it's been some time we're late on this, but just an FYI. Other than that, I didn't have a question. My hand wasn't put down from before, but thank you for everything else. Yeah.
No problem, Yusuf. Yeah,
Thank
no,
you.
much appreciated. You know, that was a concern in the community. We tried to design Scarborough Golf Club so to find that balance between people needing parking and people, you know, bus lanes and making sure traffic is moving, because, you know, it doesn't matter what community we're in. We need, you know, you need to have that balance between cars, people using bicycles, public transit, walking. We want that balance and not having one put at a great disconsideration to accommodate another mode of transportation. Fatah Hussein?
Hi there, sorry.
My apologies if I'm not pronouncing your name properly.
No, that's okay. It's Fatia. Just to be really quick about this, can you both explain why we're seeing an increase in the Toronto police budget and where are some areas we can save money in regards to the Toronto police? Thank you.
Yep, sure. So my understanding is that part of the rationale for the increase in hiring is correct me if I'm wrong, Anthony, it has to do with officers retiring, and there was a plan that was put in place for hiring over the next 5 years to ensure that we have the mandated number of frontline officers hired.
Yes, correct. Yeah, the Toronto Police Service, you know, work with the city, you know, to come up with a new 5-year hiring plan to address the separation, to address the turnover, to address the requirement of the city needs, you know, in terms of the growth and the service demand. So this budget in the 2025 Toronto Police Services, the budget increase, the increase is about 3.9%. So which is about $46 million or so, around that number. So let me give you some perspective, like the investment that we put towards the transit, like TTC. In this budget, the increase is about $84 million, something like that. So this is about like a 6.5% increase. So just want to share with you all this perspective in terms of how the city staff prioritize the investment based on the input, you know, from the public consultation, when everyone wants to invest more money on the transit, moving people around Toronto, and also address the traffic congestions in the city of Toronto. And in addition to that, you know, as part of the traffic congestions management, the city, this budget also include additional traffic agent or traffic warden to major arteries across the city. to ease the traffic congestions. So this budget includes additional 25 traffic warden. So for a total of 100 traffic warden across the city to address the traffic.
Thank you, Anthony. And my staff, Anthony, have said we've reached the end of the questioners. So I am going to extend my appreciation to yourself, Anthony, to Mayor Olivia Chow for joining us this evening. Anthony, thank you for all of your hard work on a very complicated budget. I know it's never easy, and you finish one budget, and the very next day you're doing all the prep work to start on the next year's budget. So thank you very much for all of your time, your hard work, your dedication, and being with us this evening. I would like to remind everybody, as Anthony said and the mayor said, we're in the middle of our budget process. In-person and virtual consultations are going to take place with the session at the Scarborough Civic Center tomorrow, Tuesday, January 21st, with a morning session from 9:30 a.m. to 12:30 p.m. There's an afternoon session from 1:30 p.m. to 4:30 p.m. And finally, there's an evening session starting at 6 p.m. If you would like to speak at any of those sessions, you need to register. The link is registered in the comments section. You can reach out to my office tomorrow at 416-396-7222, and my staff can help you ensure that you're registered if you'd like to make a deputation. And also, if you didn't get a chance for a question this evening, or you didn't want to ask a question, or after the meeting's over, if you do think of something that you would like to ask, please reach out to my office. As I said, the phone number is 416-396-7222, or you can reach out at Councillor_Ainslie at toronto.ca. And we'd be more than happy to get any information that you can think of or that you need. So thank you very much. I appreciate everybody's time this evening. And I'd also like to just take a moment and wish everybody and your families a very happy and prosperous New Year for 2025. And thank you for participating this evening. It's very much appreciated as always. Have a good night.
Good night, everyone.